Hi guys, we are ready to get into this first impression. I have not even swatched this yet. I'm gonna wait until after I do this initial look before I swatch. Sometimes when you swatch things, you can get kind of an idea or preconceived idea in your head about how things are going to perform. So I decided to wait on swatching it. If I'm a little low energy today, or if I seem like I am, I'm not feeling well. Sore throat and but I'm too excited to get into this palette. And you know I'm getting into the grains today. Did anybody think otherwise? So I'm gonna go ahead and start things off with the shade Puffball. Okay, right away, that is beautiful. I love ColourPop shadows. So I've got high standards for this one, high expectations, I should say. But that is blending out beautifully. All right, next I think we shall go into this shade right here, which is Fiddlehead. I'm gonna start by focusing this on the outer part of the lid before I start bringing it up into the crease. And not only will this be a nice base for whatever deeper shade that we use on the outer part of the lid, but it helps to balance the pigment and not go straight into the crease with it. And one thing I have heard from other reviews on this palette, because I couldn't not watch them, I had to wait for the second restock or the restock of this palette. So a lot of people said that these mattes are ultra blendable, and I would have to agree with that. We're getting our grunge on today. I'm gonna take a pencil brush and take that first shade Puffball here and run this on the lower lash line. I was, however, only able to get a hold of the palette when it restocked. I really would have liked to have gotten at least one of the Super Shock shadows, as well as I really wanted the trio of eyeliners. Those are just shades that I would 100% love to add to my collection. All right, to deepen up even further, I'm trying to decide between this one called Emerald City and this one called PNW, which stands for Pacific Northwest. My first instinct is to go with the blue, so I think that's what we're gonna do. And I've got this short little stubby kind of a smudger brush. I'm just going to sort of at an angle go along the upper lash line with this. I just want a little pop of color here, and then kind of work that up into the outer V once we have a lot less pigment on the brush. I'm gonna take whatever's left on the brush and just run that on the like outer third or so of the lower lash line, just so we have a connection between the upstairs and the downstairs. I'm gonna go back into that second brush and the second shade that we used, which was Fiddlehead. And I'm just going to sort of buff the edges of the blue called PNW before we put a shimmer on the lid. Sometimes I do it in a different order. This is how we're doing it today. We're getting really dark. I think we're gonna have some nice dark rich eye looks with this palette for sure. Buenas pièce de résistance. I'm gonna go into this shade right here, which is called Evergreen. And I can't even tell what this looks like. It's definitely like a beautiful duochrome looking in here. I went to try and look in the palette mirror and there is no mirror in the palette, duh. Ooh. Yes. And we're gonna go into this innermost portion. And I'm gonna pull this up a little bit as I typically do. Just gives a nice lift to the eye in my opinion. And where this shimmer is laying over that Pacific Northwest sort of tealy shade is really, really beautiful. Same brush we used for the olivey green. I'm just gonna take this and run this along the edge here. I think that's where we're going to stop with this eye look. I'm gonna use my highlighter that I used today to highlight, which is the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Superstar Glow highlighter with this little brush, and we are going to highlight a little bit on the inner corner here. And that is the eye look finished. I'm gonna pop off of here, do some mascara for sure, a lip, and something about the hair, and then I will come back, let you know how I finish off the look, and give you my first impressions on the palette. All right, party people, we are back, and this is the completed look. Finished off the eyes with my Simma Brown Now Wet n Wild Kohl liner. Whew, brain fart. And the Essence Lash Princess False Lash Effect Mascara. For lippies, I used the ColourPop BFF2 lip liner. And then in my Shop My Stash for December, I used the Charlotte Tilbury Matte Revolution lipstick in the shade Very Victoria, one of my all-time favorite nudes in my collection. And also in my Shop My Stash is this Maybelline Lifter Gloss in the shade Topaz. So that's how we finished off the look. My quick first impression thoughts. Love the shades that I used today. Oh, I forgot to point out, I'm wearing mushroom earrings. Yes, I am. You guys may have heard me talk about eclectic earrings over on Instagram. My best friend's oldest child runs this little earring business. It is fantastic. It is the most unique earrings you will ever find. And when I saw that she had these mushroom earrings, I'm a huge fan of mushrooms as well, just like Kristi. And so if you're interested in earrings, fun, eclectic earrings, go check out Eclectic Earrings on Instagram. The link is in my description box as always. But beautiful packaging. I am obsessed with mushrooms. I have them in my decor throughout the house. But the shades I used today, the mattes blend very beautifully. I was really impressed with this turquoise down here called P&W, because deeper mattes can typically be a little patchy, a little harder to blend, and I did not find that was the case whatsoever. So that was really great to see. I hope I continue to have that experience with the deeper mattes in this palette. I will say this Evergreen Shimmer shade that I used today is very interesting. I think there you might be able to see some of the shift, but it is a little sheer, which was a little tricky on the lid, having a bare lid underneath. I think in the future I would make sure that I had some kind of matte underneath as sort of a base pigment and then layer this over top. But it is beautiful. It is very, very beautiful. I will say I did try it with a little bit of spray after I went off camera before I did liner and whatnot. That does help with the shine factor just a little bit. But it's definitely an interesting texture, and not in a bad way. It's really, really beautiful. Pairs beautifully with the greener tones in this palette, but I also think I could see it with more like this row here as well. So those are my first impressions on this palette. So stay tuned, because we're getting into the second look right now. here we are with the completed look. I finished off the eyes with the Essence Lash Princess False Lash Effect Mascara, lined my lips with MAC Whirl Lip Liner, and then for my Shop My Stash is the Flower Beauty Petal Pout Lipstick in the shade Spiced Petal. This is very much a color dupe for Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk. And then just for a little bit of fun, and because it's new to me, is the Lime Crime Wet Cherry Gloss. I have mine in the shade Cherry Slime, and this smells amazing. So if you're new to the way that I review palettes, I have a couple of questions that I like to answer, and that starts with what, if anything, stood out about this palette? Holy pigment, Batman. This is so pigmented, but in a good way. Like, they're pigmented like Anastasia Beverly Hills mattes are, but in a beautiful blendable way. If you love pigment but you struggle with certain formulas, specifically ABH mattes, these are going to be really fantastic for you. A great option because ColourPop mattes blend like a dream. I have never ever had trouble with ColourPop mattes, and this one was no different, even given how exceptionally pigmented these are. The next question is, what, if anything, do you need to know before you buy this palette? And for me, that is, you need to know that there's only the 2 shimmers in this palette. If you're getting this and expecting more than that from this palette, you might reconsider or expect that you're going to use this as a companion palette, which leads me to my next point. For me, this is a companion palette. I love the 2 shimmers that are in here, but I like more in terms of shimmer in an eye look. And while these are brilliant shimmers and I did make them work and they go beautifully with the mattes in this palette, for me, I will probably find myself reaching into other palettes with this one for a lid shade. But when I review a palette, I like to just use the palette that I'm reviewing. So just know that in the future, I would use this as a companion palette unless I was doing an all matte look, which today pretty much was. You did see me add the shade Evergreen at the end, just on the outer part of the lid. But then when I tried to blend it, it kind of blended away because it was layered over so many mattes. So unless you're looking to do a lot of all matte looks, just know that about this palette, as well as this is quite, I would say that this is mostly a medium to deep toned palette. Again, not something that bothers me, but again, it makes it more of a companion palette for me. I love this palette. I will say that. I do see a ton of looks that I could get out of here, but I also do see a ton of looks that I think, oh, I would love to use these 2 colors and then this gold shadow from another palette or single or what have you. These are really beautiful, rich tones that I have not found in a ton of other palettes in this sort of combination. And so I think it's really beautiful for that. And then just pick one of your favorite shimmers and layer it over the top. Pick a highlighter even and put that over the top, and it would be beautiful. The next question is, would I purchase this palette again knowing what I know now? And the answer is a resounding yes. Even though for me that this turned out to be only a companion palette, which I kind of thought at first that these 2 shades would be enough for me, but based on how I like to build my looks and things like that, I did discover that this is more of a companion palette for me. That being said though, these rich, beautiful, pigmented yet super blendable mattes in this palette are definitely a fantastic addition to my collection and something that I really do think I will continue to reach for, and therefore, knowing what I know now, I absolutely would purchase this palette. Next is knowing what I know now. Who do I think this palette would be perfect for? Well, somebody who likes mattes, first of all, as well as somebody who likes to do rich, vibrant, jewel toned looks, but maybe is on a budget, or maybe just wants a small curated collection of jewel toned shadows to have as a companion palette to other neutral palettes, other colorful palettes, or like I said, single eyeshadows. And I think that this is a great addition to anybody who might be looking for something like that in their collection, especially if you're just starting to dabble in these types of tones. I definitely would recommend the ColourPop formula because it is ultra blendable. I've never ever had an experience with a ColourPop palette, no matter what I had on my eyes as a base or a primer, whether I set it, whether I didn't set it. I have never had a negative experience with ColourPop mattes in my entire experience with ColourPop, and I can't say that about very many other brands. So like I said, I think this would be perfect for someone who wanted to add these types of rich jewel tones for fall, for winter, for any time of the year. I mean, you can pick and choose, or you can pair this with other neutral palettes, like I said, or even lighter colored palettes. So I do think a lot of people would really enjoy this palette. And then last but not least, do I recommend this palette? Yes. Am I a fan of rawbeautykristi? Absolutely, but I would never recommend a palette to you if I didn't put my 100% stamp of approval on a palette. Of course, the packaging is right up my alley. It's beautiful. I do love Kristi, but I don't just buy collaborations because of the people that are involved or anything like that. I wouldn't recommend you a palette based on the fact that it's from rawbeautykristi and ColourPop, both of which I love. This is a good palette. If you fall into the categories that I've already talked about, you like matte looks, you like jewel tone looks, you want ultra blendable medium to deep tone mattes to add to your existing collection, if you are really into more mattes than shimmers, this would be a good palette. And just overall, I really, really love this palette. I think this is a great selection of colors to do a 1 or 2 toned or 2 shade look. I can see a ton of these as one shadow looks. The mattes specifically, I think this would be a stunning all matte look. I think this would be stunning. I loved the pink being a really large and present part of the look that I created today. So I love this palette. I would give this, for me, a 9 out of 10. Not that I typically do this type of thing, but I would give this a 9 out of 10 only because for me it's a companion palette, and because I'm not a huge fan of like yellowy gold metallic-y type colors. It does pair beautifully with the shades in this palette, and it performs beautifully as a lot of ColourPop shimmers do. But, you know, I take 1 point off just because for me it's not a standalone palette, and I do like standalone palettes. It's not that I won't dig into several different palettes, but it is my preference to just pick one palette and call it a day. So those are my thoughts on the rawbeautykristi and ColourPop at Forest Sight palette. Like I said before, I wasn't able to get my hands on any other parts of the collection, but that's okay. I still have other new stuff rolling in, including a couple of other new ColourPop palettes. So with all of that said, thank you so much for spending part of your day here with me today. I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I hope you'll consider subscribing before you leave, as well as giving this video a thumbs up. And I hope all of your makeup days are absolutely beautiful makeup days, and I will see you in my next video soon.